Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Apples and Ginos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name is Nate Groot Niblink. I'm the creator of Apples and Ginos, originator of the Zero G Draft Strategy, and in this podcast, Blake and I are going to continue our 8-episode series in which we go team by team comparing notes on our projections for the 2024-2025 season. Let's get it. And of course, I have your friend and my best friend, that roguish rake. It's Blake Creamer. Blake, how are we feeling today?
Oh man, roguish rake. It doesn't get old. I mean, but there's only so many words that rhyme with Blake. So, you're gonna have to you're getting the slim pickings there, my man. And I ain't hating it. So yeah, but I appreciate that. The best friend thing always hits nice, so I like that. But it's funny. People, when Nate and I started doing these projection shows, we literally thought, okay, we'll do 4 teams in an hour. That's what? That's great content. How about each episode is 2 hours? Oh my God. But man, we're having a good time. Like I was saying to Nate before we got on here, like I had a good time talking about San Jose the other day. What the hell? I'm weirdly at least interested to see what San Jose does this year. But this episode right here, this is going to be a banger. We got 4 beauty teams. Well, 3 that that are going to give us a lot of fantasy juice, and I'm ready to squeeze. What about you, buddy?
Always ready to squeeze. Let's get into it. Let's talk about the Ottawa Senators. Up first, key departures here. Jacob Chychrun moves on to the Washington Capitals, as we've already discussed. Vladimir Tarasenko moved on in season, and Eric Brandstrom is also gone from this team. Key additions here, they've added David Perron, Michael Amadio, and Nick Jensen. To me, this is a downgrade overall for the team. How do you feel about it, Blake?
I think losing Jacob Chychrun really and Nick Jensen is that's who's coming back. Like, that stinks. Vladimir Tarasenko, he's a good, serviceable, offensive player. Yeah, it's not great, but I mean, we're gonna get into it. I do think the coaching situation and the team situation is going to be much better. So that might be a little bit of a wash with some of the players they lost, but the coach they're gaining.
For sure. All right, coach change as mentioned. DJ Smith is out. Travis Green is in. This should be pretty interesting. It's a little bit hard to parse exactly what's going to happen here. I don't feel like I have a true beat on what this means for the Ottawa Senators. Just all their fantasy options, whether that's a check in the good column or the bad column. It could be different for different guys. So definitely we're introducing some variance to the equation here with the new coach. DJ Smith, I don't think he's a good NHL coach. To be honest with you, I don't think he's a great head coach, especially in terms of the X's and O's. I think he got out coached pretty consistently on a night-to-night basis for the Senators, and he was kind of more of a part of a problem than a part of the solution there. But he also did create an environment where the top guys could generate all these shots and scoring chances and everything. So they definitely did that much for them and just kind of turned them loose a little bit offensively, arguably too loose, and that was part of the problem. Now you get Travis Green coming in, and I know you've seen Travis Green firsthand in Vancouver, Blake. I think Travis Green could be just a tremendous positive for the team, but also be a slight negative for fantasy. How are you viewing it right now?
Overall, I think that it's going to be a big time positive. I mean, a positive for the team on the ice. Fantasy, the jury's out on that. But I mean, when he was in Vancouver, he was deploying a top line, right? So he would play his big boys. So I think we're gonna, have a good top 6 and a bottom 6. That's whatever. And then I think he'll run a true top power play as well. But I think this is going to be a stark difference because, like you said, Ottawa was given a bit of free reign with their offense. Like these guys were out there just doing whatever. But I mean, they weren't really shown how to do it. You know what I mean? It was just, It just seemed like a fire drill in there. And DJ Smith really did not show well here. I think that a lot of Ottawa's problems were coach related, right? So one thing, when Travis Green comes in here, he's going to bring a lot of structure and accountability. And that's something that was clearly lacking in Ottawa last season. And I think it's going to equal a much better defensive environment. Like Ottawa last year, just horrible. They at even strength, they had an expected goals against, they're 24th in the league, but actual goals against 30th in the league. I mean, this is terrible stuff, right? They're just playing even worse than their environment. So I think we're going to see a stark difference. We're going to see a better team. How does it stack up for fantasy? I feel okay, especially with the top guys here on this team.
All right. Well, let's take a look at the power play first up here. I think there is still a question here, especially with a new coach coming in, about whether they will run a true top power play or split it up a little bit. I think you've got Kachuk, you've got Stutzla, you got Batherson, you got Sanderson as pretty good bets for a top unit if they do go that route. Would you see those core four any differently, Blake? Would you be less less sure about those four, I guess?
I think that makes sense. These are all players, I mean, say for Sanderson, who did get a lot of run at the end of last year. So I think that's why we like Sanderson there. They're sort of veering that way. But the other three guys, Batherson, Stutzla, and Kachuk, yeah, these guys are staples on that top unit. They've performed well there before. So I think, yeah, that's a pretty safe bet. And one thing that's really nice about Ottawa, they've done this for 2 years in a row. They actually lead the league in actual power play time on ice. So they're on the power play for more than any other team in the league. So even a second power play is like still getting a reasonable amount of time. And that works really well for some of the players that they have here. But I like this. And I do like Sanderson on that power play. I think that's the way they're going to go.
All right. Yeah, that leaves, if they do go with a true top power play unit, that leaves obviously one more spot up for grabs. I mean, you've got Claude Giroux there, the old veteran. You've got David Perron, the new acquisition, who's been kind of a power play specialist at times in his career, especially as his career's worn on. Josh Norris has been a contributing member when healthy, but he's had major shoulder problems, all with the same shoulder.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to figure out if he's going to be even a significant part of this team this year. We hope so. We hope he's back and he's full strength and everything's behind him at this point. But yeah, really hard to say what that's going to look like. Do you have a personal take on which way this is going to lean? How did you end up parsing out with all the power play minutes there?
I think it's going to be Josh Norris. To
Okay.
me, I mean, it is dependent on how he shows up in training camp here. Like if he's fully healthy and good to go, I think it's Norris's for sure. Like if you look at his contract, even like they're paying this guy power play one money. He's 7.95 million per up to, for the next 4 years. So they got to get some value out of this guy, or even longer than that. Sorry. Yeah. He's still 2030. So yeah, they got to get value out of here. And the good thing is about Norris, he's done very well on the power play before. In 2021-22, in just 66 games, he had 16 goals on the power play. So this guy's a trigger man on the power play, which is a really nice piece because you've got guys like Stutzla that are excellent at distributing the puck, creating offensive chances and things like that. And Norris is there. He's got a great shot. So obviously, the shoulder's got to be right. But I'm leaning Josh Norris right off the bat to take that spot. David Perron, to me, I think they brought him in as sort of an insurance policy. So he's going to be power play too. I've projected him so kind of a minimized role here, similar to what he had in Detroit. And then Claude Giroux did spend a decent amount of time on power play 2 last year as well. I think they like him there, but again, that was DJ Smith and, who's the other guy? Who's the old guy with the comb over? I forgot. I can't remember his name right now. Jacques Martin. There you go. Yeah. So, we got Travis Green coming in here. He could throw the lines in a blender and none of this will matter, but I'm leaning Josh Norris right now.
Okay. Yeah, when I did the numbers, I gave Drew 2 minutes 45 seconds, and I gave Norris 2 minutes 30 seconds. So splitting it a little bit between them. The top guys in Ottawa get I have Kachuk and Stutzla for 3 minutes 45 seconds. As you mentioned, they get a ton of power play time, and so their top guys get a lot of time relative to a lot of other top guys around the league. So pretty valuable spot to be on a top power play in Ottawa for that reason, especially if they can start to convert a little bit better this year. I do still think there's a chance at least that they split this thing up, and that would be pretty devastating for fantasy purposes. You're just going to take the ceiling right off of a lot of players if you do that. I don't know how likely that is, but they do have some personnel where they can make it work. Obviously, they've got Shabbat and Sanderson on the back end. They've got two guys who are capable back there. Then you do have like a full-on top six where you've got enough guys that you can make it work. You throw in like a Ridley Grieg as the last forward on a second unit, and like that's enough to make a coach consider splitting it up in my mind, and that worries me a little bit about this team. So just something to keep in mind. It's not something that I've really accounted for in my projections. I am basically projecting them to have a true top power play unit and just more splitting that fourth forward slot. But it is something to keep an eye on for sure, and especially see if they like if you see say Kachuk and Stutzla on different power play units in training camp, then that's something I want to be aware of, and probably I'm gonna have to back off my projection at that point.
You better put Stutzla's projection way up, buddy. All right. You're on notice. All right. We'll get into it. All right.
Well, let's do it. Let's get into Tim Stutzla. I thought I was doing him a pretty good solid here. 28 goals, 50.5 assists, rounding up to 79 points there. You have him for 30 goals, 56 assists. I guess rounding down to 85 points there. So we're 6 points apart.
Yeah.
It's not the greatest gulf in the history of mankind, but talk to me about Stutzla and try to convince me why I should give him 6 more points here.
I just look at what he wasn't able to do last year because of his shoulder injury, right? And I really do believe that narrative. This guy played through an injury. He said that he had an injury and his shooting percentage fell off a cliff. Like in his big season, his 90-point season, he shot 17.1%, which I think you and I probably agree is the outlier at this point. He's not a 17% shooter. So maybe 40 goals isn't in the wheelhouse ever for Stutzla. But 9.4% that he shot in 23-24, that show ain't no good. He's a much better player than that. He's a much more dynamic player, a much more offensive player. And I think his shooting percentage is going to go up. I've got him for 13% on the season. So I think, I mean, that feels right to me. That's higher than his first two seasons, but much lower than the 17% he had 2 years ago. So that's one thing right there. I definitely feel like his efficiency is going to be a lot better. And then the power play performance, that's where he really fell off. Like his numbers were they dipped a little bit, his metrics at 5-on-5 and even strength, but his numbers fell off a cliff. His conversion on the power play, like this guy got one power play goal in 75 games. Timmy Stutz, but no, this makes no sense. So I'm definitely projecting a hell of a lot more power play goals at the very least. And then, yeah, just everything kind of fell off on the power play, and you've got a coaching change mid-season, and the two coaches stink. So it was just a kerfuffle in Ottawa there. Nothing was going right. It was hard to kind of parse out. There was no consistency. So I think a full season with Travis Green, a full training camp, they're going to get that power play humming, and I think it's going to be a lot better than what it showed last year. And to me, this is a guy that should be able to get around 30 power play points. I've got him for 27 power play points, bouncing back big time from last year. So yeah, I think we're really close on the player. I've got him a little hotter in probably some of the metrics in the on ice numbers.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I also have him for 27 power play points for what it's worth. Yeah, obviously he's gonna get a lot of volume most likely. Like after the top six, they got a lot of guys that you probably don't want to be playing. So I imagine they're gonna run their top six a fair bit, similar to what they did last year in that regard. Stutzla probably going to be one of these guys who gets a lot of ice time at even strength and on the power play as well. So I have him for 12.5% shooting on the season, so we're pretty in line there. It's really just you've got him for a few more even strength assists, it sounds like, so you're probably baking in some better efficiency and maybe some more volume from the team at even strength when he's on the ice, which is possible, but I think as we go through this, you'll just see that I'm a little bit more hesitant about the coaching situation, and I'm just a little bit down, and it just so happens that it affects Stutzla more than it affects the rest of these guys. So, I think I'm generally in on the player. I think the player's good. I don't think he's got like a massive 40 goal plus scoring ceiling that would take him into like an elite tier for me. I think he's definitely much more of a very good player than an elite player. So don't foresee myself getting over the moon about him, but it is a really good situation in Ottawa that's shaping up for him to have another season where he gets 21 minutes a night and has every opportunity to lead this team in points. Next player, Brady Tkachuk, captain. He's a player that I've got for 37 goals, 40 assists, 77 points. You've got him for 38 goals, 41 assists, and 79 points. What can you say about Brady Tkachuk? He's going to shoot the lights out. He's going to hit the lights out. He's going to provide PIMs if you're in a PIMs league. It's not going to be efficient. He's not a big shooting percentage guy. He is a chucker. It's going to be, I've gone for 10.3. You're probably similar given that you're not much higher on the overall goals than I am. He's generally like a decently efficient player, like high IPP player. Obviously, he's generating a ton of shots and scoring chances when he's on the ice with those shot numbers. Yeah, I think he's pretty solid player across the board and should have this close to point per game projection, but without the more efficiency in the goal scoring column, I just don't think that's, again, Brady Tkachuk is ever going to be truly elite in terms of the offensive production. Obviously, he does a lot of other stuff for fantasy purposes that we get excited about, and that's why he ends up going sometimes in first rounds. You'll see him go. So, yeah, especially in bangers categories, leagues, he's obviously on a different level. But talk to me about Tkachuk, if you see the role changing here at all, and what do you think of the 10% shooting percentage, putting him squarely in the chucker category?
Yeah, I don't know why we haven't thought of this before. Brady Tkachuk. What,
oh my goodness,
this is right in front of our face, and it's taken me this long. So he's now known as Brady Tkachuk because he's an absolute chucker. He's the king of the chuckers, the Brady Tkachukers. So that said, I love what he brings to the table. I echo all the stuff you said here. One thing I've been reading something recently. Jack Hahn. I don't know, if our listeners know who that is, but I had him on the pod a little while ago. He does this ebook called Hockey Tactics. So shout out to him. But one of the things he said about Brady Tkachuk, which I thought was really interesting, is yes, he generates a lot of shots and chances, but the big issue with Brady Tkachuk and his offense is his spacing. So he gets himself in too tight to the net. Like he's like, they're not efficient chances. Like he's getting a ton of them, but he's in so tight, like he can't really do anything with that. So it's like, I feel like there's a little bit of development that has to happen there. And if that doesn't happen, I don't think his ceiling really goes up. You know what I mean? Like we might just be looking at a point per game player, from now on, just based on the volume of the statistics that he accrues. But I feel good about this player, though. He's 24 years old. His brother just won the Stanley Cup. This guy comes from a hockey family, and he clearly is passionate and loves this game. And I think he's going to be shot out of a cannon to start the year. I'm really excited about Brady Tkachuk. I think first round Brady Tkachuk, that's in a points league, even with banger weighting, that's still a bit too much for me. I don't like the offensive ceiling based on what I just said, but I love the metrics, right? And I think how that shooting percentage goes up is he works on his spacing a little bit, gets into positions where he has a better chance of jamming it in, right? Like if he's right in tight, there's not much you can do there. So, and I think the book's out on this guy, right? Like he's not bringing a lot of other stuff to the table there. So I do love Brady Tkachuk. What do I have him for? I think we already talked about it. Yeah, 70, like 80 points. That's pretty nice. And then with the bangers, where are you drafting Brady Tkachuk if you're doing a Cats league? How far up, like in the first round, does he go?
Yeah, pretty high, obviously. Like he can be a pretty dominant force in shots and goal and hits and not hurt you too badly relative to the talent around him in the goals and assists. But I'd still have a tough time drafting him over the guys that I think have like 110 plus point potential. You got your Kaprizovs, you got your Rantanens, you got your Jack Hugheses. Guys in that range, it's just so hard to just like take a 30 plus point haircut right on the first round. I'd just rather try to make up the hits later on in different ways, like prioritize that Owen Tippett later on or whoever that player might be, right? That's the way that I generally prefer to play it. But, when you get into the back half of the first round, past kind of those guys with that truly elite point scoring potential, that's when I start to seriously consider Brady Tkachuk because he does bring something truly special with that shots and hits combo. All right, next up, Claude Giroux. 22 goals, 39 assists, 61 points for me. 19 goals, 42 assists, 61 points for Blake. I think Giroux just kind of fits in as the unassuming, underappreciated veteran on this team now. I don't expect that he's going to be on the top power play unit the entire season. I kind of hedged my bets, splitting time between him and Norris in my projections here. But I do think that he's going to be used a fair bit. He's still a reliable two-way guy. Obviously, was the captain in Philadelphia for a long time. Just a consummate pro, still doing the thing at a ripe old age for fantasy or for general hockey purposes. I think you see this the same way, Blake. I feel really comfortable with this projection, and I don't think it's going to go too much below this or too much above it.
Yeah, I feel like it's really safe. It's a safe projection. This is a safe player to pick up for your teams, and that this is the kind of guy you need. This is a grumpy old man. This is a very boring fantasy option at this point in his career. But yeah, like he could, 60 points, right winger. That's really nice. Plus, he does have the potential of moving up to power play 1. So yeah, I'm not expecting. Obviously, I've got the 19 goals. He only had 21 last year. Like I think some of that goal scoring is he's probably done putting up any kind of reasonable goal scoring totals, but he still is a big time factor in offense generation, right? Chance assists, shot assists, all that stuff, zone entries. He does that, right? And he's got amazing players that he's playing with. So I think his floor is absolutely safe. And there's a little bit of ceiling there if he can move up to that top power play and lock that down consistently.
Yep. Next up, Shane Pinto. I have him for 24 goals, 21 assists, 45 points. You have him for 21 goals, 31 assists, round down to 51 points there. Pinto, guy who showed out in some advanced metrics for time last year, did cool off after a bit, but the last quarter to a third of the season played pretty much exclusively on a line with Kachuk and Batherson, which is pretty exciting if he could reprise that role. Obviously, different coach, so you don't want to expect that, but has at least shown that he can hang with those guys in a pretty high end role. So that could be exciting if we see something like that come back up again for Shane Pinto. I do think that there is some ceiling for this guy, and I am a little bit interested in what that looks like. The problem, as you mentioned before, Josh Norris getting paid a whole ton of money. If Josh Norris is healthy, are they really going to play Pinto above Josh Norris? One other thing that I think about too, like Tim Stützle, never been a good face-off guy. Last year was actually his best year at 46.7%. That's not really good enough from your top center. It's not a guy that you're going to want taking important draws. So you got to wonder if they try to work some other center things out and maybe move Stützle off to a wing at some point. Then they could pull Norris into the top 6 or pull Pinto into the top 6, maybe demote somebody like David Perron down to the third line, and that might balance the top 6 a little bit better and get something that Travis Green might like a little bit more. I don't know. Obviously, it's just speculation at this point until we get some training camp news, but I think there are at least some pathways where Pinto does stick in the top 6 and does have some fantasy relevance.
Yep. I like where your head's at, man. And I do think based on, what happened with Shane Pinto last year, this guy is not on anybody's radar. And you just detailed a bunch of outs that he has to potentially, have a good offensive season. Like I've got him for 51. I could see him beating that, like not by a bunch, right? Because there's just not enough opportunity for him here. But again, this is a metrics guy that showed out a little bit. He's definitely got, his efficiency could be a lot better. I mean, he had half the season off, and then he comes back and fires an 8.2% shooting percentage in 41 games, which stinks, right? So I think that should go up. He's lots of shots, decent ice time, like over 18 minutes. Yeah, I think you're right though about the Norris thing, and I just can't get past the salary for Norris. I think, how do you bury Josh Norris on the third line? Like if he's healthy, his shoulder's good to go. I think Norris is a lock at that 2C, and that's going to affect Shane Pinto's value. But I would love to see them move Stützle over to the wing. I mean, give me the Pinto bean. We got to get him in here. All right. He's making chili. All right. Fun fact. It's actually not that fun, but actually, this isn't fun or a fact. I was going to ask your opinion on lima beans. All right. Have you eaten lima beans? Are lima beans still a thing on Earth? Like, do people are like, we need a side for the meal tonight. Yeah, you got those lima beans in there? Yeah, let's put that in here. I'll put a little butter on that, salt. Here you go. Are you eating lima beans, Nate?
Not on the regular, that's for sure. Eaten a lot of different beans before I'm going to the lima bean. It's down the list. It's I don't know. We might have to do a tiered ranking at some point of beans, just for in honor of Shane Pinto.
Not
But
even close to the pinto bean. All right. Yeah. Lima
correct.
bean. Yeah. That's terrible. Get out of my sight.
Yeah. One other thing I will note, one thing that gives me a lot of hope with the shooting percentage and the potential bounce back in efficiency for Pinto, 8.9 shots per 60 at all strengths across those 18 plus minutes per night, 41 games played, so it's a decent sample size, but
Yeah.
11.9 individual scoring chances for per 60, which is just terrific numbers for Shane
Just
Pinto there.
unlucky.
So, yeah, I do think that he could, if he reprises that role between Kachuk and Batherson. I don't know how likely that is for the reasons we mentioned, but if he does sit there again, then I'm going to be very interested in getting some Shane Pinto on some teams. Next up, David Perron. I had him for 20.5 goals, 20.9 assists, 41 points. I don't think Perron is going to factor into this team a whole lot. I think he just got signed to be kind of that middle six winger that they can move up and down and kind of fits in. He's a shooter, does those sorts of things for you. He's definitely getting up there in age at this point. And I think he's just kind of that piece that they felt they needed to kind of round out the middle six in terms of the wings.
Yep, not too much on David Perron. I do think he's just kind of an insurance play, and he's a power play specialist. This guy's great. He's a great power play performer, right? But I don't think he's getting power play one. But if the power play's sagging, you throw David Perron on there, and maybe you get a different look, and you get a spark or something like that. Plus, yeah, he's such an annoying guy to play against. So and that's not changing with age. This guy's a bit of a dingus. I remember the Canucks playing St. Louis in the playoffs one year, and it was just like the David Perron show. This guy was all over the ice. So he's a difference maker, can be, right? But he's getting up in age. So just a nice piece in real life for the Ottawa Senators, I think.
Yep. Next up, Drake Batherson. I have him for 29 goals, 33 assists, 62 points. You have him for 31 goals, 36 assists, 67 points. I like Drake Batherson a fair bit. It'll be interesting to see how he's utilized this year. Yeah, does all the things for you, right? He's going to be over 200 shots. He's going to be over 100 hits. He's going to probably play on that top power play. He's been there pretty much the entire time he's been healthy for the Senators. So I do like this player a fair bit. He's going to contribute in ways even when he's not in like on a hot streak. He can still contribute and not leave you completely hanging in terms of fantasy production. So I'm a pretty big fan of Drake Batherson overall.
Yeah, I don't have much to add there. Like, in 22, 23, he had a great power play season. So 29 power play points, including 14 goals, but his even strength production was terrible. He had an 8.8 shooting percentage there, which was garbage. And then last year, he fell off on the power play. But, the even strength stuff was actually pretty decent. So I think if you can put it together, my man, like, can we do power play and even strength? Like, I think this guy could have a 75-point ceiling, right? I'm not expecting that this year. And you can't when you have a new coach and you don't know what the hell's going on. But if things break right, like I could see this guy, getting over 70 points.
Yep. I don't think that's too crazy.
And he
Josh,
bangs.
Handy
Does
bangs.
that.
Last one here, Josh Norris. I have for 24 goals, 21 assists, 45 points. You have for 24 goals, 26 assists, 50 points. Yeah, it really just does depend for me completely on how healthy he is, how much they trust him to play a lot of minutes, a lot of hard minutes. Do they try to bring him in a little bit slowly and make sure that everything's feeling okay? And yeah, do they kind of give him the treat him with kid gloves a little bit in the early going? Is my biggest question. I do think Norris is a pretty talented player. When he's on, he shoots, he hits, he does all the things that you want your player to do for fantasy. Really just does come down to how much time is he going to be given. I've got him pretty much in line with Pinto. I have Pinto actually at 16 minutes 45 seconds overall, and I have Norris at 16 minutes 30 seconds. But if Norris has a full clean bill of health and the shoulders finally fine after multiple injuries to it, then yeah, he could be in the 18-minute range and yeah, be soaring past this projection. So definitely a wide range of outcomes for the player. You want to be following the training camp reports on him for sure and checking in on how they feel about that shoulder heading into the season.
Yep, definitely agree with you there. Like, something I try and stay away from is guys that have had these major injuries and then we haven't seen them play yet coming off it, right? You know what I mean? Like they shut this guy down, that's fine. But like we need to see what he's capable of doing. So normally I'm out on players like this, but there's very little risk with Josh Norris in fantasy, right? Like I projected him for 50. I think that's a pretty that's kind of like a floor-ish projection. You got him for 45. I think that's the absolute floor in my opinion. Based on his salary. Like unless he comes back and he's not right at all and he's trying to fight through it. Like if that happens, then yeah, his production is going to fall off a cliff. But I think there's very little risk. You can fade centers, and a guy like Josh Norris is there waiting for you, like well after pick 150. And this guy, he is pretty damn good on the power play. So if he locks down power play 1 and he's able to do, what he's done in the past, like, yeah, now we're looking at maybe a 60-point player, 65-point player, maybe more. I don't know. So, but that said, we can't project that because of Travis Green, but there's very little risk in picking this guy up. So I definitely take a swing with him late in drafts.
All right. Next up, Jake Sanderson. I've got him for 11 goals, 32 assists, 43 points. You have 9 goals, 39 assists, 48 points. I do have Sanderson as the power play quarterback at 3 minutes 15 seconds compared to Shabbat at 2 minutes 30 seconds. I don't know if you see that any differently. I have him for 17 power play points. Blake, where's the difference between our two projections coming?
I've got him at 17 as well. So 17
Okay.
power play points. So yeah, just even strength performance at this point. I've got him for 18 minutes, like on the season, just under 24 minutes average time on ice. So is that kind of in line with what you've got?
I've got him a little bit more, actually. I've got him 18-15, even strength, 24-30,
Oh my.
24 minutes, 30 seconds overall. So you must be giving him some more efficiency. 36% IPP, 9.25%
Yeah.
on ice shooting percentage.
Yeah, I'm above both of those by a little bit. So 38% IPP at even strength. I've got him at 10% on ice shooting percentage,
Okay.
which could be a little high there. Like this is not an offensive defenseman. This is a guy that is super valuable for his team. Like, if they're trying to win hockey games, right? So yeah, maybe a touch high, but I don't know. Like it was sort of in line with what I saw, and I am expecting a bounce back in efficiency for the team. So I don't mind, bumping up his on ice shooting percentage a little bit there.
All right. Shabbat, I have for 9 goals, 31 assists, 40 points. You have 10 goals, 34 assists, 44 points. Yeah, I've gone for 10 power play points, 23 minutes, 20 minutes time on ice at even strength is where I see him getting most of his run.
Yep, I'm in line with you there. It's this he's great. He's such a good skater. He does everything well. But obviously, I do think the team is trending towards Jake Sanderson. This is their guy, right? They locked him down for a big contract, and I mentioned this last year, and I'll mention it again. The team loves him. Right. I saw an interview with Brady Tkachuk, and I've seen other interviews too, where they just talk about this guy's value to the team. And the players are doing that. I've heard the coaches talk about that. This guy's a beauty and he's doing all the right things. I'm talking about Jake Sanderson. So that is going to definitely mute the fantasy production for Thomas Chabot. And Chabot's, had some issues staying healthy, right? Like that's not something we're completely worried about, but another 51 games this year, 68 the year before, 59 the year before, 49 the year before. So he's not playing a full season. So that's really frustrating. And now without power play 1, I think, yeah, we're looking at a 40 to 45 point defenseman.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Sanderson can take another step this year and really cement that role. Otherwise, new coach, there is some intrigue that could be had there in terms of the roles and how this ice time is really divvied up. But I do tend to agree Sanderson seems to be the guy that Ottawa as an organization is moving towards, and it's really going to be up to him if he can take his game to another level. I'm not sure that he's got like elite offensive upside for fantasy purposes. I think he's probably going to be more of like a 50-ish point guy when he's in his prime, but yeah, definitely think he can get to this 43 and go beyond that potentially this season. All right, let's talk about the top targets for myself. Tim Stützle, number 1, Shane Pinto, number 2, and Drake Batherson, number 3. I do think Stützle might get overcorrected in some of your drafts this year for what happened last year, and I think that would be a mistake, especially given his multi-cat coverage. Shane Pinto, I just think there's a lot of upside here that's not necessarily being baked in, so you might not even have to draft him in your league depending on how deep your settings go, how many teams games are, etc. But a guy that you should definitely be keeping an eye on because, as I mentioned, if he does get back in that prime spot with Kachuk and Batherson, it really did seem like it was just bad luck that he wasn't absolutely crushing that spot. Batherson, I do think, has a lot of potential. As you mentioned, he's got potential beyond the kind of 60 to 65 point range where we had him. I think he's got potential beyond that. And so I want to be in on Batherson in case he turns out to be one of Travis Green's top dogs.
You bet your sweet bippy, buddy. I've got Timmy Stutz as my number one. I think that makes sense and totally agree with you. I think we'll be able to get him at a little bit of value this year. I think it's a mistake to fade Timmy Stutz, into the 4th round or 5th round. Like, oh, that's a nice spot to be picking up Tim Stützle. And that's where I've seen him go in my drafts that I've done so far. I've got Shane Pinto as the second. You could, the really nice thing about these episodes is like you talk about the players and you kind of form your thoughts a little bit while we're talking. So I think I'd go Shane Pinto and, / Josh Norris. I think based on like what we see in training camp and who Travis Green guy is, that's who I'm going with because they're similar players. It's just about who's going to get the opportunity. Right. And then I put Jake Sanderson on as my third. Something you said like 2 years ago really stuck with me, trying to find power play 1 quarterbacks late in the draft. And I think that Sanderson is going much later in drafts. And like you said, there's not a huge offensive ceiling there, but I do like Ottawa's power play for a bounce back. And if he's, the quarterback on that, I think there's a good chance he can put up some good points. So give me Jake Sanderson there, late in your drafts. And plus he's a block monster. Amazing blocks for Jake Sanderson in category leagues as well.
Don't mind that at all. All right, next up is the New York Rangers. Key departures here, nothing too crazy. Blake Wheeler moves on. Jack Roslovic moves on. Eric Gustafson moves on. One big key addition here is Riley Smith, and I do actually think this is going to kind of solidify that top 6 right wing slot that had been open. They'd been holding a candle for Capo Caco for quite some time. I tend to think that ship has sailed at this point, and Riley Smith should slot in pretty comfortably. He realistically slotted in pretty well for Pittsburgh in kind of a similar role last year. I think he can do the same here with some pretty good line mates as well. So I think that makes a lot of sense. No change in the coaching here. Peter Laviolette returns as head coach. It was a good season for the Rangers overall. Obviously had a really strong run and preseason going to be one of the top cup favorites yet again. People are going to be taking bets on that. I will note obviously you have like the elite players there. You have the Panarin and Trocheck line, which went absolutely nuts last year. But like the Rangers' even strength underlying numbers were not like incredible. They were right around the middle of the league, just above 50% in Corsi for percentage. They were actually 19th in the league in Corsi for percentage. And they're 16th in the league in scoring chance for percentage at even strength. Again, 50.4% there. So it's they're definitely not like beating the doors down at even strength the way that I think some people view them. And we'll get into a little bit of why that might be. But I will just say, just kind of relates back to Laviolette there. I don't think this is quite as good of an even strength environment for everyone on the team, the way that some people might think it is. Definitely, I think Panarin has his own gravity as a player at even strength. But let's get into that a little bit. Let's go to the power play, Blake. I think this is probably as set in stone as any power play around the league. Do you disagree?
Nope, we're locked in, and that is amazing for fantasy.
Yeah. Panarin, Zibanejad, Kreider, Trocheck, Fox. That does leave Alexis Lafreniere on the outside. If there was a slot for Lafreniere, we could get pretty excited about what Lafreniere might bring to the table this year, because even without that top power play, we still have some pretty good projections on him. But unfortunately, I just don't see any scenario outside of injury in which these guys are just completely locked into their roles. Everything was clicking last year. Power play, a big reason for the Rangers' overall success last year. Don't see any reason for them to change it up just yet.
Yep, makes sense.
All right, let's dig into the individual players then. Trocheck centering the top line. Some people still think that the Zibanejad line is the top line. That is definitely not the case in any way that you could possibly measure it. Trocheck, 26.5 goals, 49.5 assists, gets me to 76 points. For my projection, you have for 26 goals, 51 assists, 77 points. Talk to me about Vinny Tro, friend of the show.
I love the player, and I love that he's landed in a spot where he can actually, reach his potential. That line with Panarin and Lafreniere was, that was basically the even strength production for the Rangers, right? Like that's a really interesting point that you brought up about the Rangers is it's kind of, yeah, it masks what the team truly is, right? Like, yeah, their even strength offense was not great. Their finishing at even strength was not great, but that's how good their power play was, right? And Trocheck was a big part of that. Oh yeah, 77 points in 82 games last year. I love it. His efficiency wasn't great, which we just talked about. But he's a beefer. 174 hits, 92 blocks for a forward, buddy. Oh man, I love this guy. Nate, do you still have that sound drop somewhere? Are you able to kick that sound drop in here just onto the episode? Just let me know if you're ready on that, because I think we got to hear that. We got to hear this man's beautiful baritone.
You mean this one?
I'm Vincent Trocheck from the New York Rangers, and you're listening to the Apples and Geno's Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
God, I'm mildly aroused. And that's fine. I feel good about that. But I don't have too much more to say on Trocheck. It's just obviously this is a really good example of a line that works, right? You've got Trocheck as sort of that defensive anchor. He's helping the defense break out the puck. They give it to Panarin. Lafreniere knows where to go, right? And Panarin's like this big time rusher. It's a match made in heaven, and that's not going to change, right? And I like you've said this in notes before, like this is your line one. Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere is line one. Zibanejad, Kreider, and Riley Smith is line two. That's a bit of a change in the guard after what happened last year. But anyways, I'm yammering on. I love Vincent Trocheck, and I think he's going to be great. Where do you draft? This is an interesting question. Put you on the spot here. Where do you draft Vincent Trocheck in category leagues? Like what round even?
Yeah, it is a tough ask. The hits are so good, shots are terrific, the blocks are terrific, as you mentioned. So he does really contribute across all categories. The tough part about it is that he really is tied to Panarin. And so if there was ever a Panarin injury, then Trocheck, I think, would absolutely just kind of disintegrate for fantasy purposes. Obviously, like he'll still have some of that peripheral floor, but the point production would absolutely fall off a cliff. Yeah, Panarin just is that guy and elevates everyone around him. So that's the part that I don't love is just like picking a player based on his projected situation for a full season. But yeah, I think Trocheck is a terrific player in his own right, and you have to project him for this spot. There's no reason for them to change at this point. So, I don't know exactly where that ends up fitting him in. Probably like the fourth round, I would say, is about as high as I would go for Trocheck and still feel reasonably comfortable about that. He's probably going to be center only, right? So you're not getting any dual eligibility, any of that extra usefulness that way. Fourth round would probably be as high as I would go, and most likely I'm still looking other directions at that point in the draft.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm looking at his ADP here, just in our best balls, the Apples and Geno's ADP that we're developing here. He's going in the sixth round. So sixth round, and that's a points league. So fourth round Cats, I think makes sense, but I'm with you. I think I'd be looking at a more sure thing, right? Someone who's not reliant on other people for his production.
Right. Well, as far as it goes, if you're going to rely on someone for your production, Artemi Panarin's a pretty good bet. 39 goals, 74 assists, 112 points with the round down for my own projection here. You have him for 41 goals, 72 assists, 113 points. So we get there to pretty much the same projection in the end. Talk to me about Panarin. Obviously, it was a big departure this year. He started shooting the puck far more than he ever had in his career. Do you think that continues? Do you think it's just a different thing that he's doing under Laviolette that he's never really done before, and that's just going to happen again? Or do you think it regresses somewhat?
I think we have to bake in some regression there because he's only done it for one season out of his whole career. Like this was by far, a career high. I guess in, 2019, 2020, his first year with the Rangers, in 69 games, he had 8.06 shots on goal per 60 at 5-on-5. But this year he was cooking at 9.29 over 82 games. I mean, where is that coming from? Like in 2022, the year before, he shot 5.83. So he's almost like close to doubling his shots on goal per 60. That's a red flag. Like we have to treat that as a bit of a red flag. I don't feel good about where Artemi Panarin is being drafted, to be honest. Like I feel like it's a bit of risky bisky for me. Like we're basically chasing a performance, which I do think could happen again. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. Like I've got him for, a bit of a regression, but not much, right? I've got him for 8.87 shots a goal per 60. So that would be like the second highest mark of his career. So obviously I'm buying into it a little bit. And I think the only thing that we can look at is the coaching change, right? And and then his line, right? He, like I said, he's got Trocheck and Lafreniere, and that line really clicked. They work really well together. And we don't see that very often in the NHL anymore, do we? Like these like Legion of Doom lines, or like the West Coast Express, or, if they go again this year, they just go bananas this year. Like now we're looking at like a pretty awesome line that works really well together, but it's hard to bank on. So, and he's going at like 11 or 12, ADP 11 or 12. And I'm just not here for it. I still like kind of early second, mid second for Artemi Panarin, but yeah, this is an amazing offensive player. He's like Kucherov in the way that he generates chances for himself and for his teammates. So definitely draft with confidence, but I feel like I'd like to, see something a little bit more consistent with a high draft pick where he's going.
Yeah, you mentioned 8 point something shots per 60. That's just even strength, right? He had 11.02
right. Yeah,
all
sorry,
strengths.
even strength, right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense. I've gone for 8.5 shots per 60 at even strength, so a little bit down from you. Yeah, it's a massive, massive outlier, the shots last year, and we've seen some things like this, like Tage Thompson comes to mind from his big season, and he stepped back immediately from that the following year. Maybe we see that bounce back, and it looks like a different take a year from now again, but yeah, it just seems like this is probably a scenario where it all came together for Panarin. And while there's probably an element of, he's doing something different now, and that's likely to continue in some respect, it also was probably just the best version of that we're ever going to see out of Panarin. And so I think he gets the point total. Like the point total I feel pretty decent about, but how much of that is going to be shots and thereby goals is definitely up for debate. The third member of the line, Alexis Lafreniere, as we've already mentioned, I have for 30 goals, 29 assists, 59 points. You have him for 28 goals, 35 assists, 63 points. And that's basically without much power play time. I have him for 1 minute and 30 power play time on the season. So you can imagine how this projection would really take off with some power play time, especially on a power play as good as the Rangers are. Mm-hmm. So it's a player that I don't want to be away from. Like, the even strength role is so good here as well. This is a guy who played 1.5 minutes more at even strength than Mika Zibanejad did last year. I don't think a lot of people are realizing that, how highly Laviolette really did prioritize this Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere line at even strength, how they're really the thing that kept the Rangers going at even strength for much of the year. So yeah, I definitely think Lafreniere is worth the pick in that range, and worth baking in just a little bit of that contingent upside where, man, if this guy ever got the top power play, you could just kind of tack on like almost 20 extra points on this projection because of how good that power play is. And now you're really looking at a breakout star.
It's so true. And it's so disappointing and crushing at the same time, because you're like, this is a player that we should be excited about. And there's only injury. Injury is the only way we see Lafreniere on that power play. And again, like you said, we're looking at probably 20 more points on top of this projection if he gets on that power play. So it sucks. Definitely. Like, this is a guy under the hood. Everything looks really good. Like all the things that I'm interested in, but it just the actual stats that he's generating, the metrics, shots, chances, goals. This guy does it all. He looked great in the playoffs too. But what sucks as well, like he averaged 17 minutes, 16 seconds average time on ice during the regular season. In the playoffs, that went down to not much, but 16:41. So I think that's where he's going to live this year. And that's just not going to be enough for me to be in on Lafreniere this year. Like, he's great category leagues as well, but where he's being drafted as well. I feel like there's players there that you could get a top line, top power play player where Lafreniere is being drafted. Like in our A and G leagues, he's 94 overall ADP, right? I still think there's going to be some much better options there with a hell of a lot more opportunity. And I like banking on opportunity. If I had to choose, I would probably look at someone, I would feel comfortable at that draft position going with someone with opportunity rather than someone who's not getting the opportunity but has amazing metrics, right? Otherwise, I'd just draft Daniel Sprong.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that I should mention too, like Lafreniere is not a player that I was personally high on. Had 3 seasons in the league where he really hadn't started showing out, and I don't really feel like I was necessarily wrong to have that take overall. But it really does show that the correct deployment, you get exposure to Panarin, you get a little bit of wind in your sails, and what that
Coaching.
can really do for a player. I do think that Laviolette, in a large way, really facilitated the breakout of this player to a level where now we think that he could legitimately be a star player in this league, as was obviously projected when he was taken first overall. All right, let's get to the second line. Mika Zibanejad, 28 goals, 52.5 assists is what I have him for. Comes out to 81 points. You have him for 34 goals, 45 assists, 79 points. So a little bit of disparity there just in the goal versus assist breakdown. But it comes out to about the same point projection. This is pretty much all power play. 32 power play points I have for Mika Zibanejad. Is really lost a lot at even strength. Not nearly as efficient there. Long in the rearview mirror is that one season where he was like up there with Austin Matthews for goal scoring. I don't think that's in the wheelhouse for Zibanejad anymore. I don't know if it's like he's a little bit young for you to call it like age-related decline. I don't know if this is just more the player he always was, and he just got insanely hot for a good long stretch there in that particular season. But yeah, basically, I'm just not excited about Zibanejad. I feel like he's a relatively safe option because of how good he is on that power play and how stable that power play is. But I don't think there's a lot of ceiling for Zibanejad beyond an 80-point projection.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate too, right? Like we've outlined a few things with New York that are going on, like, and one of them was even strength inefficiency, right? And Zibanejad was a casualty of that as well, right? Like his shooting percentage not great at even strength, right? And his shots on goal per 60 went down, his scoring chances went down. It's just not what you want to see, right? And I think it's a bit of a changing the guard when like Panarin comes out and does what he did, and that line, is kind of taking over as the number one offensive, they're taking that offensive load. Yeah, it's just not a player I want to be excited about. And this is like, to me, a perennial, like he was a late third, early fourth round guy, maybe mid fourth. And I there's no way I'd be drafting Zibanejad at that point, especially center only. Like you said, I think his floor is solid because of being on the power play there, but I'm not really liking what's going on with the even strength deployment. And then, he's attached to Chris Kreider as well, who's, just 1 year older. Like that's a guy who's based on massive efficiency. Like I do like Chris Kreider, but they're both getting older, and, you got this other line that's just crushing out there. So yeah, he's going to get minimized, and I don't see how he's going to hit over our projections here.
Yeah, so let's go to Kreider. I have him for 38 goals, 28 assists, rounding down to 65 points. You have him for 38 goals, 31 assists, and 69 points, rather. Nice. I think that Kreider is similar. I feel like Kreider and Zibanejad are obviously tied together. Basically, anytime one steps on the ice, there's not going to be too far behind. And so they're probably going to have very similar correlated outcomes for fantasy purposes.
Yep.
I think Kreider is probably a lock for 30 plus goals this year, barring injury, but I don't see him getting much past this 38 projection that we both have him for. 40 would probably be really close to the ultimate ceiling for me. Just a similar player where I think he's going to have some value. If he slips in your particular draft, then I wouldn't feel bad about clicking him, but it's also not a player that I'm like rushing to click on in my drafts this year.
Yeah, he's getting steamed up big time this year. I keep referencing our ADP here at A&G, but his ADP in that points league, which is similar to Cupful scoring, he's at 48 Chris Kreider at 48. Hell no, I'm not into that. But I mean, the fact is this guy is one of the best net front players in the league. I mean, he does that almost better than anyone else. I think I saw, on NHL.com, they put out like an NHL Edge, graphic or whatever, and Kreider led the league by a wide margin at net front goals. Like it was sick. There was just no one else close. So he does that, and he does it really well, and he's obviously got familiarity with Mika Zibanejad. And if they do put Riley Smith out there, that's probably the best piece I've seen them add to that line. So there is a little bit of hope for, not that there isn't hope. These guys we're projecting them for nice projections, but ceiling hope. Like we're excited about this player. I think with Riley Smith there, that could equal something a little bit better than what he's had. But yeah, I'm not into chicken necks this year, but in banger leagues, buddy, I mean, this guy's a beefer. We know that. And then the power play goals and points, you like that. But yeah, I'm not that excited about Kreider this year. I don't know.
Yeah. Let's talk about Riley Smith then. 16 goals, 27 assists, 43 points is what I had. You had him for 17 goals, 29 assists, 46 points. Do think that, yeah, he probably is the best right winger that they've had on this line for a little while. I don't think he's enough of a talent to say that it's like going to significantly boost their fantasy point totals, but it is something that I noted. Like they finally have a right winger that should be able to keep pace with them, basically. So yeah, it's a nice piece. Riley Smith just figures to be like the streamer from New York this year, where everybody else is going to be rostered. But when New York has a good schedule, you can go out and you can get Riley Smith.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say there. Like I've got him for 46 points, 7 points on the power play. He's going to be Joe average. And yeah, that's going to be valuable come stream time.
All right, Adam Fox, obviously the headliner on defense for the Rangers. I have him for 15 goals, 62 assists, rounds up to 78 points, 14 goals, 61 assists, 75 points for you, Blake. Adam Fox kind of is what he is. I posted this on Twitter a while back, but Adam Fox has kind of been a fish pick for me. Like if you think about like the sharp people in the room are like sharks, like they're it's like a poker term, right? If you're a shark, you're like one of the better players at the table. So that leaves everybody else to be the fish, right? The people who are getting eaten. So Fox
I draft him every year, Nate. What are you trying to say about me? Oh my God.
I'm not trying to make any aspersions on anyone, but I do think that Fox has been a bit of a trap for fantasy managers because of that shiny point total that he always posts. But the shots are just okay. I have him for 156 shots this year. He doesn't hit. 33 hits is what I have him for. He blocks decently well, 130 blocks, so he's going to do that for you. But it's that lack of the other stuff that really elevates some of the other defensemen for fantasy. Don't get me wrong. He's still definitely up there. He's still probably in your top 10 defensemen for a fantasy points league. But I do think that Fox is generally just a guy who leaves a little bit of meat on the bone relative to some of the other guys who fill categories a bit better.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to put that, and I agree with it. This guy, he's an amazing player. I would say he's probably ranked higher as a defenseman in actuality than he is in fantasy. Like this guy is incredible. He's a big key to the success here in New York. Just the way he breaks the puck out, his ability to generate chances for his teammates and everybody else, all that stuff. Plus, yeah, like double-digit goals. That's really nice. The power play stuff. But yeah, it's kind of empty for fantasy. It feels like empty calories, Adam Fox. He's like the lowest guy on that tier that he's in. You know what I mean? It's like, I couldn't get Quinn Hughes. I couldn't get, Dougie Hamilton or whoever else. Like, I'll go with Adam Fox. That's nice, right? And if you draft him as such, you're going to love it because it's going to be the quietest, most boring 70 points you've ever had, right? But yeah, it definitely stinks for category leagues, but I'm happy with the player. I think, his shooting percentage is going to go down. Obviously had 12.4%, which is a career high last year. He's not going to do that again, folks. I guess maybe he was the only one scoring at even strength. I don't know what was happening there. Fun fact about Adam Fox, for 2 straight seasons, like he had a 78 game season and an 82 game season. He scored 1 power play goal in the 2 seasons. 1 power play goal? That is wild stuff. One of those years in 2021-22, he had 0 goals, 33 assists on the power play. So, yeah, I mean, his role is pretty defined. He did have 6 goals on the power play this year, so that's nice, but I would expect that to kind of go down as well. Anyways, Adam Fox is a beauty. I mean, you're happy if you get him, but there's other guys I like a lot better.
Yep. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that ADP settles to. I think that people might be finally catching up on that one a little bit. Other defensemen here, you've got Keandre Miller. I don't think he's going to be a big factor, but I have him for 8 goals, 27.5 assists, rounds up to 36 points. I think that probably it's going to be between Miller and Trouba for some second power play time here. I really don't know exactly what they're going to do. They had Eric Gustafson before. To handle that. There's not a lot of time that anybody who's not on the top power play is going to get anyway, so it's probably not worth thinking about too hard when assessing these other defensemen. But yeah, Miller probably just a really good real life defenseman, not somebody that we're going to get too excited about for fantasy anytime soon. Trouba, I think, has really started to decline. I've gone for 6 goals, 23 assists, 29 points. You had him for 5 goals, 20 assists, rounding up to 26 points there. Yeah, it's just a little bit scary right now. What's going on with Jacob Trouba? I talked about it in the top 10 shocking statistics, but Trouba got absolutely caved in terms of the Corsi for percentage, the scoring chance for percentage, all that stuff that I look at. Was far and away the worst player on the team. They tried to trade him this offseason, and he wouldn't let go of his no trade clause. Yeah, what it all means, I'm not entirely certain, but it's not good vibes at the very least for Jacob Trouba at the moment. And they have Braden Schneider behind him. And Braden Schneider kind of profiles like the exact same dude a little bit. Throws the hits, throws the body, blocks shots, does kind of all the same stuff. And so maybe they even try to like slowly ease Trouba out and like force him down the lineup, maybe put him on the third pair a little bit, piss him off enough that he will waive the no trade clause. I don't know. Right. That's total speculation on my part, but yeah, I'm just not super interested. I know that he puts up big numbers for Bangers Cats leagues, but if the deployment's not there, then immediately those really big Bangers numbers start to come down in a significant way, and the point production is not there anymore the way that it was in years past.
Yeah, that's kind of shocking with his numbers there. Yeah, like he's supposed to be a defensive kind of defenseman, a difference maker in that realm, right? Because he's not doing anything offensively. So the fact that he's just getting crunched, it's not a good thing, right? But I mean, the good thing is, as long as he's getting deployment, it doesn't matter because you're not drafting Jacob Trouba for anything other than because he's a beefer. He's a mega beefer. But yeah, if he's getting deprioritized there with his deployment, we're out, right? That show ain't no good.
Right. Top 3 targets for myself. I want to be in on Alexis Lafreniere this year. I think he's demonstrated the talent now, and I want to be in and around that. I did throw in Riley Smith here for streamer purposes, obviously. I did throw in Philip Hedl basically because I just wanted to talk about him. I know you talked about him a while back as a player of interest. Yeah, it's a player that has shown out in some metrics that I look at when he's been healthy. Obviously, last year was pretty much just a lost season for him. I'm hoping that he comes back healthy. Would probably, again, take some injuries for him to have any fantasy relevance this year, but I do think that the player is talented enough that I just kind of wanted to throw him on this list and say we should pay attention if and when Philip Hedl ever does get a fair shake.
I like that third line. Like, obviously, Lafreniere is, graduated. He's up to the top line now, but you've got Philip Hedl, Capo Caco, and then Will Cooley. He's a beefer extraordinaire. He's a beef dip, and we like it. So that could be a really fun third line, just, putting up good streamers, right? But Philip Hedl is obviously the best one there. I actually projected him, because I was into it. I got him for 20 goals and 24 assists, right? With minimal power play numbers, 14 and a half minutes average time on ice. So it's risky bisky with Philip Hedl as well, because he has a head injury, right? He had like a pretty bad head injury. So those are the ones we can't really be like, oh, what's the recovery time on that? It's like, well, when his brain starts feeling better, you're like, oh, all right. So what, a couple weeks or what? So yeah, I mean, Philip Hedl, I hope he comes back fully healthy. And if so, maybe he can hit that projection. But for my top 3, I put Adam Fox as my top just because of what I described there. 70 points, and he's at the bottom of the tier their defense that he's in. So I think you're going to get Adam Fox at a little bit of value, just to your point. Like people are starting to catch on, like, or at least maybe not value him the way that he potentially should be in fantasy, right? But yeah, empty calories, as we said. Vinny Tro, I've got at number 2, but it might be a little bit too high for me to pick him. And then Alexis Lafreniere, I mean, if I have a chance to draft him at what I feel is value, which is probably over pick 100, then I'm happy to do it, right? Because he brings a lot to the table, and he's the next man up on that power play if anybody gets injured.
All right, let's move it right along. Let's talk about the New York Islanders, everybody's favorite team for fantasy purposes.
Oh,
Key
yeah.
departures, none. They basically are running it back this year. They did add Anthony Duclair, and they did sign Maxim Siplakov. I'm sure that I'm absolutely destroying that name, and I do apologize. But yeah, signing coming over from Russia could slot straight into the lineup as not just a prospect, but a guy who's spent some time over there already. So those are the additions. Coaching changes. Obviously, Patrick Roy returns as a head coach after he replaced Lane Lambert in season. He did have an effect. It was mostly positive, but he did kill some different players' time on ice when he arrived. So we'll get into that a little bit more. How do you see Patrick Roy? Do you think this is going to continue to be a net positive for the team overall?
I think so. And one of the main reasons is because they were surprisingly bad in a lot of ways, right? So there's only one way to go. And I think Patrick Roy is a competitor. He's won at every level. Like this guy gives a crap, right? And and they, like you said, they did have some positive stuff happen. Like I did kind of like I did with St. Louis with Berube and Drew Bannister. I compared Lane Lambert and Patrick Roy, and all of the metrics went up at even strength, right? So Corsi 4 per 60, Corsi against. So they were, chucking pucks more, and suppressing them on the way back, right? Their shots against got better. Their goals for went up. Their shooting percentage went up. Their high danger scoring chances actually went from 30th in the league, high danger chances against per 60, to 4th best in high danger chances against per 60. So yeah, definitely shored up some stuff on the defensive end there, but the power play got a lot worse under Patrick Roy. So that's something we want to keep an eye on. But I do think it's going to be a net positive with a full off season here for them to kind of get things right the way they want to.
Right. Power play, true top power play here. You got Matthew Barzal, you got Bo Horvat, you got Brock Nelson, you got Noah Dobson. I think the fourth forward here, though, is up for grabs. Kyle Palmieri was the most common guy there last year, but you got the incoming Anthony Duclair. Do you think that Palmieri gets back in just based on being the guy who was there last year, or do you think that this is Duclair's role and part of the reason that they went out to get him this offseason?
I think they'll start with Palmieri, right? For some reason, and it's an unknown reason for me at this point as a fantasy analyst, in my basement currently. Like, why can't Anthony Duclair get, some kind of good deployment, right? Power play 1 deployment. He's a great power play performer. He has been, occasionally throughout the years. But I think Kyle Palmieri is old faithful. This guy's coming off a really nice season, 10 power play goals with 10 power play assists, right? So that's pretty nice for a team that, like Kyle Palmieri had 20 power play points, folks. That's kind of an interesting stat right off the bat. So I think he'll start it out there, but I think it'll be a bit of a short leash. I could see Duclair up there. I could see Anders Lee even moving up there. We got other guys like Oliver Wahlstrom, who, Nate and I just hope somehow gets power play 1 at some point in his career so we can see what the hell goes on here.
Yeah, that would be a pretty shocking one, especially for a coach like Wah, but I would love to see it. That's for sure. Yeah, I think I'm a little more optimistic that Duclair could get there just based on the signing. Palmieri was relatively efficient, but I think he was probably over efficient last year in that power play role. And so even if he starts there, I think that Duclair will be knocking on the door probably sooner rather than later. Overall, I did kind of give just a slight edge to Palmieri on the season just because he's the incumbent. But 2.5 minutes to 2 minutes and 15 seconds for Duclair is how I projected it in the end. All right, let's start with the top here. Bo Horvat, Blake's favorite player. I have him for 33 goals, 33 assists, and 66 points. Blake has him for 35 goals, 33 assists, 68 points. Clearly, completely in love with this player.
I tried to
So
shave
tell
off as
me.
many points as I could, Nate. All right. It's just the way it comes out. This guy, he's a boring fantasy player, but he's good. Like that's terrible analysis, but like he's in a really good spot. He's a number one center. He's amazing at faceoff, so he's going to be out there in the last minute of games. He's going to get a ton of deployment, and he's attached to Barzal, and they actually play really well together. So yeah, 68 points. That's a nice little season for Bo Horvat there. I've got him, just over 20 minutes. I feel fine with it. Like power play points, I've got him for 20. I think there's some juice there as well with Horvat, but it's not a player I'm excited about, and I can't in good conscience ever draft this man. I don't know. Like I need to draft Horvat at major value, and that's just me being petty. And I'll tell you that for free right now.
Yeah, I think you might be able to draft Horvat at pretty good value, center only. Probably gonna be faded on the Islanders. Nobody's excited, right? You can probably get him, and you're gonna get the 30 plus goals. You're gonna get the 60, 65 points. Like you can lock that in and never think about it again in your lineup, and that's worth something in fantasy, especially if it is coming a little bit later in your draft. Anthony Duclair is the player that I've projected to join Barzal and Horvat on the top line. I have him for 25 goals, 22 assists, 47 points. You have him for 27 goals, 25 assists, 52 points. A little bit more excited on Duclair there. I think that this is, in theory, a good fit. I just have very little confidence that Duclair is going to stay there all year long, especially for a coach like Waugh. They don't have anybody else, which is kind of the thing that I think might keep him there. I have him for only 16 minutes average time on ice. If Waugh just sucks it up and plays him there the whole year, like he could get up to 18 plus even. So there is definitely some ceiling case here for Duclair where I do think that he could, approach 60 points even. But I think that most likely scenario in my mind anyway is that he starts in this spot but then gets moved around a little bit here and there, probably goes to the Nelson line at some point. Maybe they try to run some duos there, Horvat, Barzal, and Nelson, Duclair at some point. I don't know exactly what will happen, but I don't think, just given what we've seen of Duclair throughout his career so far, that he's just going to be locked in on the top line all season long.
Yep, I think it would be foolish to try and project that, right? Like we got a new face in a new place with a new coach, pretty much. Like we can't with certainty be like, yeah, Duclair's locked in. But that said, I think he's an excellent fit on that top line. Like in terms of his play style, like he's a sniper, right? And again, like I've talked about this a little bit, but this guy's, he's really good at his conversion. He's a very efficient player, whereas Barzal is not, right? But he's an amazing rusher. He's an amazing generator of chances and shots and shot assists and all that stuff. So now you pair him with Duclair, who's a really good converter, and you also have Horvat, who is pretty damn good defensively, right? So it's just a line that makes a lot of sense. It doesn't mean it's going to equal anything, but I think Duclair could be a really nice piece for fantasy, like as a flyer pick, at the end of your drafts, like you said, there's a chance he could get power play 1, right? And it's not like that's an amazing thing. New York Islanders were 17th overall in power play percentage last year. So that's mid, right? I don't think that's going to get any better or worse, honestly. But I think it's a good spot, and I like the player, but maybe it'll be next year, not this upcoming year, but next year with the Islanders, where Duclair really kind of finds his legs and maybe puts up a bigger season.
Yeah, it makes sense, but as we know, the myth of rational coaching in the NHL is something that was made up to comfort the children. So we won't count on that too many times for fantasy purposes. Let's get to Barzal here. 24 goals, 57 assists, 81 points for me, 26 goals, 60 assists, 86 points for you. So you got a little bit more for him there. I know you really like this player, so go off, Blake. Tell me all about his rushes and how he's amazing at holding on to the puck and not actually putting it in the net.
See, that's a little passive aggressive, Nate. All right. And you know what? I ain't hating it. All right. You're spicy tonight. You're a spicy nugget, Nate, and I'm here for it. But yeah, this is just Like this isn't even me. Like the man whose stuff I look at. Basically, I look at Nate, the way he does fantasy, and then I look at Corey Schneider. Those are two people that I'm looking up to on a regular basis. And Corey Schneider loves Matt Barzal, and I do too, and I understand why. Right? It's first off, he's one of the best skaters in the league, which maybe the best. I don't know. Like, so that is something that we can't just. Oh, wow, he's a great skater. Like, because he's a great skater and he's also elite. He's in the 98th percentile in chance assists, shot assists, zone entries. This guy does that. Zone entries that lead to chances. Matt Barzal, he's a legend. All right. You know who else? Like two players that really show out in these micro stats that Corey Schneider does, Matt Barzal and Nikolai Ehlers. All right. Mm-hmm. We're talking about like Matt Barzal to me is like, he's like Nikolai Ehlers if Nikolai Ehlers got 20 minutes. Right. I mean, and Matt Barzal, he's a chucker, right? He's not an efficient player like Ehlers. Ehlers is more efficient, but like this is the potential of what Ehlers could do if he got a bunch of time. So right. I think they're in the same universe, and I love they're just leaning into Matt Barzal. Patrick Waugh is as well. Like gave him 20 minutes average time on ice. He's getting that top power play. I mean, 25 power play points he got last year. Like I've got him for 27 this year. I think it's going to be a big season. He's a great player to watch, and I'm excited. I'm excited about this player. If he's center right wing, which I've seen him in Yahoo before, like that's amazing too. If he has the dual eligibility, I'm even higher on Matt Barzal. If he's center only, it gets a little, it's like a center that I'm fading centers and then trying to pick up Matt Barzal, at value.
Right. Yep, makes sense to me. I do like Matt Barzal. Not a big time goal scorer, which holds down his value. Obviously, in a lot of leagues that value goals, categories leagues naturally value goals, obviously, but also your points leagues usually have pretty big weight on the goal scoring, so that holds down his value. But yeah, if you're going to get point per game level production from Matt Barzal, that's something that you definitely cannot ignore. Next up, the grumpiest man alive, Brock Nelson, 32 goals, 38 assists, 70 points for me, 34 goals, 31 assists, 65 points for you, Blake. I think that Brock Nelson is probably just that dude. He kind of took a step last year, started getting even more individual scoring chances than he ever had before. That was kind of interesting, but it also seemed to oddly correspond with like a drop in efficiency. So he kind of ended up roughly about the same as he always has. So I don't know exactly what to make of that. I don't know if that means we should expect better things for Nelson this year. I've kind of just ended up projecting him roughly about where he always ends up, it seems, at the end of the season. I don't know if you got any further insight into that, Blake.
Not really, but it's a good sign. It's like, like things changed and he came out with the same numbers. It's like, yeah, that's what we want for fantasy, a really consistent guy. And that's what Brock Nelson is. I can't even hate on the man. I learned this halfway through last season. I was like, I can't talk yang on Brock Nelson. I mean, he's doing stuff out there. He's very efficient. And this last season, he wasn't efficient, like you said, right? And started shooting more. So I think, does that bounce back? Does he shoot a little less and get back to efficiency? Maybe, right? But he's power play one locked in. I think, 65 to 70 points is where this guy lives. And it's just boring. And you can get him at value. Who's out there like, I got it. Oh, Brock Nelson's there. I'm excited about that player. It's like, no, you're not. All right. but maybe you should be, right? This is a guy who's going to prop up the floor of your fantasy team.
Yep. Yeah, definitely fits into that category. Like I had him on my Kikuffle team last year, got him, I think, the 9th or 10th round in a 14-team league there. And yeah, just a guy that I felt super good about clicking on, knowing that I was going to get that like close to 70 points, 30 to 35 goals, and I could just lock that up, put it in the bank, never have to think about it for the course of the year. There's definitely something to be said for that. Again, reason number 3,562 why you should fade centers and just pick up Brock Nelson in the double-digit rounds where he might go in your league this year. One thing that could help him, though, is if he ever got some line mates. Anders Lee, I have here 22 goals, 15 assists, 37 points. You have similar 22 goals, 18 assists, 40 points. Palmieri on the other side, I have for 27 goals and 21 assists for 48 points. You have him for 28 goals, 20 assists for 48 points. Yeah, I just think that these are lackluster line mates
Yeah.
for a second line center of Nelson's caliber, and probably end up holding him back a little bit. I don't know by how much, but he's definitely not getting a whole bunch of boost from these guys being on his line.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It just holds down his ceiling. But yeah, these players like Anders Lee and Cal Palmieri, it's slim pickings. They're doing the thing, and it's nice to see, but it's not something I want to bank on, and it's just doesn't feel good for fantasy. Like they're definitely streamers. Even Cal Palmieri with 20 power play points. No one drafted Cal Palmieri last year, and they probably dropped him, after his little hot streak where he was popping off with his shots and scoring percentage. So yeah, it's weird kind of how they've fallen off. Like Anders Lee, he's great in category leagues, but I mean 37 points in 81 games. That's no good. And his deployment kind of fell off a cliff. He spent, the last part of the season playing with JGP, Jean-Gabriel Pajot, and Pierre Engvall. Like that show ain't no good, right? So I'm definitely out on Lee. Kyle Palmieri to me is probably the streamer that I'd look at if I needed a New York Islander.
Yep. Yeah, I guess the one thing that could potentially raise the profile for Brock Nelson is if Tsiplakov, again, I'm sure I'm butchering that name, but if he comes over and is useful, he had kind of an interesting stat line in the KHL last year, 31 goals, but only 47 points overall in 65 games. So could be some sort of scoring touch there. He's turning 26 before the start of this season, so mature player already. Should be kind of ready to go from that standpoint. So maybe there's something there where he has a little bit more chemistry with Nelson. That helps a little bit for both those players. But yet, I didn't do a projection for Tsiplakov. I don't know what to expect from him, to be quite honest with you. But I don't think that he's got a terribly high bar to clear to get onto the Nelson line and actually provide potentially some fantasy relevance at some point this season.
If you had to guess, do you think he's going to get top 6 deployment? Because that's a player I actually am not even really familiar with. I remember hearing about it, and then I kind of just put it out of my mind. Like not someone I'm super interested in.
I think that he probably gets a look there, just because I don't think Anders Lee holds on to that spot for any length of time. So I think he at least gets a look there at some point, and then it's really going to be about how fast he can acclimate to the NHL. And I wouldn't put it past him to be a decent piece at some point. Just how fast he can make the transition is really going to be the key there. All right, Noah Dobson next up, 12 goals, 48 assists, 60 points from me, 11 goals, 53 assists, 65 points from you with the round up there. Noah Dobson, the biggest note that I have here is that before Wah came on, he was averaging 25 minutes, 47 seconds per night. And after Wah, it went down to 22 minutes, 50 seconds. So literally 3 minutes off his ice time, pretty much all at even strength. So that's a pretty big fall off for Noah Dobson, and it really did hurt his fantasy production after Wah came on. Another season, does Wah deploy him differently? I've heard the talk about him, playing through some injuries and stuff like that. Maybe that kind of correlated with Wah's arrival, and that's some explanation. But I am concerned about it, and I do think that it's pretty unlikely that we see Dobson achieve the heights he did last year.
Dobby, the master has given Dobby a sock. Oh God. That's Harry Potter, everybody. All right. Yeah, I'm it's a storyline we have to watch, that's for sure. But I really do feel like Wah was just he was trying to push any buttons that he possibly could to get his team into the playoffs, right? And there's no one else. Like, who are they gonna replace Noah Dobson with and what he's able to do? Like, this guy played over 20 minutes average time on ice at even strength last year. I mean, this guy's a horse. He's out there doing stuff. Really high IPP last year as well, 52% IPP at even strength, which is really nice. I feel like there's no one that they can replace him with. Like nothing that makes sense. So I gave him the full treatment here. I think he's going to get top pairing, top power play. I have Dobson for 24 power play points. Is really nice. 65 points, pretty good. Averaging 24 minutes time on ice for the season. So I don't have too many concerns, but yeah, we do have to watch that storyline there as to what Patrick Roy is going to do.
Yeah, I guess the difference there is probably even strength. I've gone for 23 minutes, so 1 full minute less than you, which is probably the majority of our difference in projection there. Ryan Pulak, usually, I shouldn't say usually, but most likely going to run the second power play unit. 7 goals, 22 points, 29 assists projection. He does bang, throws the body around, block shots, does all that stuff. Actually has some decent shot numbers for a peripheral type defenseman as well. But yeah, he's not gonna be a big factor in terms of point production. That's for sure. 29% even strength IPP. That should tell you pretty much all you need to know about Ryan Pulak. Yeah, really just a bangers league. Deep bangers league option is what I would classify Ryan Pulak as.
Deep bangers. All right. That's a choice there, Nate. You know who I think is going to run power play too? Mike Riley.
Could be.
Yeah, I think that's what Patrick Roy did. He put Riley in over Dobson, which, like, for some unknown reason, but this guy was getting some, some of the deployment there. And this is a guy, he's a, reasonable offensive guy. This is like a Tony D'Angelo type guy, a Shane Gostisbehere. I mean, he's not to the level of those players, but he's a guy that plays sheltered offensive minutes. And I don't know, Patrick Roy must have seen something in this player. Like, they're trying to get into the playoffs and they're throwing Mike Riley out there, giving him the power play 1 treatment, like, in all the last games leading up to the playoffs, pretty much. I mean, he's getting a ton of time. So anyways, I projected him. I don't know if you projected Mike Riley, Nate, but I got Riley for 9 goals and 21 assists. So that's something. I mean, if Dobson goes down, then now we're having a conversation. Like, does Riley move up there, or is it Pulak?
Yeah, I think basically that's a wait and see, where whoever's on the second power play unit, if Dobson were to go down, you just obviously go out and get them. But I don't think either of those guys are going to be rostered before that. So it's going to be an in the moment kind of decision for fantasy purposes. Top 3 targets for myself: number 1, Brock Nelson; number 2, Bo Horvat; number 3, Anthony Duclair. Yeah, I think we've explained our stances on these players. I love Brock Nelson, love the value you can get him at. I do think you're going to be able to get Bo Horvat at decent value. A new season, full season in the new environment with the Islanders there, and people kind of feel like they know what he is now, and they're not going to be excited about it. Not going to be new and shiny this year. I think his ADP will drop. You'll get him at value. Anthony Duclair, just for that potential upside case.
How dare you, sir? You put Bo Horvat in, you didn't put Matt Barzal in there. That's, I don't know, buddy. That's you were up here, and now you're still up here. You're even higher, all right, but for different reasons, all right. Yeah, I got Matt Barzal as my number 1. I'm loving Barzal this year. I'm hoping to get a piece. I want to get in there. It sounds weird. I've got Noah Dobson as my number 2 and Anthony Duclair as my number 3. Yeah, I'm loving the potential value of the late flyer pick, sleeper value on Anthony Duclair.
All right. Well, I think we can leave the Islanders behind. We can head on over to the New Jersey Devils. This is a team that has undergone some changes for sure. Tyler Toffoli has left. He went to Winnipeg at the trade deadline. John Marino has left. Alexander Holtz is out the door. They have made some pretty significant additions here. Jacob Markstrom being the key one in net. Hopefully that kind of stabilizes things in net for them, and they can build outward from there. Brett Pesce, big free agent signing to stabilize the defense there. Brendan Dillon also brought in on defense, probably on the 3rd pair there. And Stefan Nason also brought in, a guy who did play some net front power play time for Carolina in the past. Coaching changes. Lindy Ruff started the year. Travis Green came in as interim. They are both out in favor of Sheldon Keefe coming in this year, coming over from Toronto. Have to think this is a net positive, and there's at least a scenario in my mind where Sheldon Keefe kind of does unlock this team to go to that next level, to make a jump to the playoffs again, and also elevates the team for fantasy purposes. How do you feel about the Keefe acquisition for the Devils this year?
I think it's great. It's weird because I'm just looking at some of the statistics for the Devils in 2022-23 in terms of their team metrics, and they played pretty damn well, right? Like, defensively, they weren't it wasn't fire wagon hockey the way it was this last year with Lindy Ruff. Like they actually were pretty defensively sound, suppressing chances, suppressing, shots, shot assists, all that stuff. And obviously their offense was great. I'm talking about 2 years ago, New Jersey. Whereas last year, New Jersey, yeah, it was just like New Jersey is one of the best, if not the best rush team in the league. But with that comes a bunch of chances on the way back. And that's, ultimately spelled the demise of Lindy Ruff. So what I'm interested in, and maybe you can kind of fill me in on this, is like Sheldon Keefe, when he was with the Leafs, they were not a good rush team, at least last year. They were an in zone team, right? Like dump in, forecheck, and then set up in zone, right? So I'll preface this with saying that I think Sheldon Keefe is going to be a massive positive here. I think he's a great coach, and I'm excited to see what he does. But I'm wondering if the reason the rush play wasn't so good in Toronto was because of the roster that he had. And if now that he has a roster that includes Jack Hughes and Jesper Bratt and Timo Meier, and Luke Hughes, these amazing rushers, is he going to change his style, or do you think he's going to kind of go away from the rush a little bit and kind of get back to that in zone chance the way he did in Toronto?
I think that there'll probably be a little from column A and a little from column B. I do think that Keefe tried to tailor his system to his players' strengths. So I imagine that he'll do some of that again in New Jersey, but I do think that he will probably install a bit more structure in terms of not just freewheeling rushes in both directions. That's definitely not going to fly for Keefe. And I do think that Keefe is a guy who improved over his time in Toronto. Obviously, Toronto was his first stop as a NHL head coach. I do think that he's learned some things and he's going to take that to New Jersey. But he does have experience, with star players and knows how to deploy them to get them to maximize their potential. And that's all good news for us in fantasy. True top power play has to be the expectation here in New Jersey. You got Jack Hughes, you got Jesper Bratt, you got Nico Hischier, you got Timo Meier. I think all four of those are locked in. But the big question here, who is the top power play quarterback for the New Jersey Devils? You got Dougie Hamilton, who obviously missed a bunch of last year, but also ceded the top power play to Luke Hughes before he was injured. You got the Hughes connection there. Does that carry any weight where, Jack Hughes, obviously the leader of this team in terms of point production, does he carry enough gravity that he gets his brother on the power play unit to play with him? Or does Dougie Hamilton, just the guy that they decide fits what they want to do on the power play, a little bit better with the new coach in town? What's your take there, Blake?
I mean, I think the correct decision is Dougie Hamilton. Like, get Dougie Hamilton out there on the power play. But if you put Luke Hughes out there, they are completely different defensemen, right? That changes the power play. So it's really going to come down to, how does Keefe want to run that power play? Does he want to run it through Dougie Hamilton? Because when he's out there, he's just pumping shots on net. He's taking a ton of shots, and, guys are cleaning up the garbage and potting rebounds, or, everything's running through him. Whereas obviously Luke Hughes is much more of a facilitator, right? And a smooth skating facilitator. He'll be able to enter the zone better than Dougie Hamilton does. So it's just really dependent on how Keefe, how they want to prioritize that power play. If I had to bet, I would think Hamilton would get it. I think, I don't really buy the narrative that Luke Hughes was on there because of Jack Hughes. I think, like he was on there on his own merit. Obviously they liked what they saw, and Luke Hughes has the potential to be a really, really good fantasy piece for years to come. Like, imagine if he's like Quinn Hughes, but, a bigger frame. Like that's scary to think about. Like, if he can even do 70% of what Quinn Hughes is doing, like, this guy's going to smash. So I'm a big fan of Luke Hughes, but I really do think that when you got a player like Dougie Hamilton, you're paying him what you're paying him. Get him out there on the power play and let him just chuck pucks at the net, and let Timo Meier clean up the garbage.
Yeah, for myself, I do have Luke Hughes a little bit projected over Dougie Hamilton. I'm at 2 minutes 45 seconds to Hamilton at 2 minutes 30 seconds, so it's not like I'm drawing a huge distinction between the two of them. It comes out in the projection to 18.0 power play points for Luke Hughes and 18.1 for Hamilton. So, pretty much drawing it down the middle. I think there's also a chance that they just kind of flip-flop throughout the year, depending on how well the power play is going. Sheldon Keefe has not been shy to move Morgan Riley off the top power play at times in Toronto, and so I don't think he would be shy about trying some new things. He'll stick with the player for a while, but if it's not working, he will move on. So I think you will see both of them in that role at some point throughout the season. It'll be more about, can one of these guys really stake a claim there? I do think it's an interesting point to think through, uh, how that power play runs with Hamilton versus Hughes, because they are very different stylistically. The addition of Timo Meier and him really coming on towards the end of last year. Timo Meier is a guy who does dominate a fair amount of shot attempts on the power play, and you've already got Jack Hughes there, who
Yep.
obviously carries his own gravity in that regard. Nico Hischier has been a guy who actually takes a lot of shots on the power play as well. And so, do they decide that they want Luke Hughes on the back end to facilitate those guys rather than, let Dougie Hamilton take what ultimately end up being a little bit lower percentage shots? Still has really good individual scoring chance numbers on the power play, but definitely it's never going to be quite as good as the positions that you find these forwards shooting from. And so if you have somebody like Luke Hughes on the back end who can, manipulate the defense and get the forwards open for a shot closer to the net, maybe that's the way that they like to go. Obviously speculation at this point, but that's how I've got it projected out at the moment. Let's dig into the projections here. Started off with Jack Hughes, 47 goals for me, 61 assists, and 108 points. You have him for 45 goals, 65 assists, 110 points. Obviously, we're pretty into Jack Hughes. Really just needs to stay healthy to be able to hit this. Monstrous shot numbers. I have him for 360 shots. Does not hit, does not block, doesn't do any of the extra stuff for you. Pretty useless for the bangers categories, but is definitely going to score a lot of points as long as he can finally stay healthy for a full season.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this player as usual. Please don't let me down, my man. Obviously we staked our claim on Jack Hughes last year, and he looked amazing before he got injured. Like, I think we can all agree on that. This guy was looking all world out there. He was looking like one of the best players in the entire league, and then he got injured and he came back. Probably way too early because of Jersey's situation. They were battling to get into the playoffs, and it was crunch time, and he knew he needed to be out there, and it just couldn't make it happen. So it's this injury narrative. We talk about it so much. It's in the Discord. I'm having conversations with other analysts about it, and I can't stand it. I mean, you're not going to draft Jack Hughes, a potential like 110 point player who generates a ridiculous amount of offense on his own, right? Who had a pretty inefficient year last year. You're not going to draft him because you're baking in games that he's going to miss. What the hell? I don't get it. I don't know. Talk to me, Nate, a little bit about your, because I think we're on the same page, but I don't know if you're as adamant as I am about it. Like, I'm just, especially with Jack Hughes in particular, like, I don't buy the narrative that this guy, his body frame is too small. Like, he's not built for the NHL. He's always going to be injured. Like, I don't know. Where are you at with that narrative?
Yeah, I don't buy that at all. The only time that I really factor injury or injury risk into my evaluation of when I should take a player in fantasy is if they have multiple injuries and the same body part, basically. It seems like there's something, more systemic and more long lasting that's going on. If it's just, a collection of injuries, like I'm looking through Jack Hughes, his injury history, you've got knee, upper body, shoulder, upper body, obviously the shoulder surgery last year. A couple of shoulder issues. That doesn't feel great, but at the same time, this is a really young player still. Probably, if you're gonna have a couple shoulder injuries, you want them to happen earlier in your career rather than later. I personally am not that worried about Jack Hughes. If you want to, break the tie away from Jack Hughes towards the other guys who have the 110 point potential, then sure. Like, I'm not gonna quibble with you there. If you want to go Cale Makar over Jack Hughes because Makar is that much better than all the defensemen, sure, go with Cale Makar. Totally fine pick there. If you want to, just break some ties because of that, then, within the same tier, how you make those decisions is pretty much up to you in my mind. But if you're going to start fading him back into the range where, like, I'm trying to think who else is going on the turn there, but like, If you're fading him back into like the second round, I've seen him go in some places. That
Or
to
even
me
like
is
Brady
just a
Kachuk
mistake.
over, like I've seen that, or even Matthew Kachuk over Jack Hughes. Like that, I'm not here for that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, because they're durable players. Like anybody can get injured at any time. I mean, I know there's some science to it, but like we don't have access to it. We don't have access to these guys' body scans and being like, oh, there's it's definitely misaligned over on this side, so that's going to equal an injury over here. It's like, no, we just have to do our best, right? And I want to put everything on our side. And this is a player that is insane offensively. The best rusher in the league.
Yep. Timo Meyer, the left wing one that I have projected. I think that most likely you're going to see Meyer with Bratt and Heischer on the second line, maybe. I tried looking through their lines. I think it was most often Palat with Bratt and Heischer. So it's just stylistically, it feels weird to me to have Meyer and Hughes on the same line because both of them are big time shot producers. But it could be the way that they decide to go. Either way, I think Timo Meyer did finally figure it out last year, and I do have a pretty healthy projection on him for this year. 34 goals, 44 assists, 78 points. You have him for 35 goals, 45 assists, 80 points. I think we both see this pretty similarly. He's going to approach, maybe not quite get to 300 shots on goal. He's going to throw a lot of hits. I have him for 128. I think it's the wheels up for Timo Meyer here in his second full year for the Devils.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. And I've done a couple of Yahoo mock drafts, and it's so strange. Timo Meyer is like, I've seen him after 200 ADP, right? He's one of those guys that's just lost in the back, like Philip Forsberg was last year, which makes no sense whatsoever. So obviously, Yahoo is going to correct that, but how much do they correct it? This is a guy we need to be in on this year. Like we're looking at point per game with insane periffs, right? And again, we talk about this a lot. So many outs, so many ways that he can smash that projection. Like if he can be a little bit more efficient, if he starts popping off on the power play, right? Which, he didn't have last year in Jersey. He had a 46% power play share. He was tooting in all our faces, right? Lindy Ruff was, which like, get this man out on the power play. And I definitely believe there was some injury issues with Timo Meyer last year. Obviously, he only played 69 games, which is not so nice. But I think when he came back a little bit early, he wasn't ready, but was trying to, help New Jersey in their playoff push. So I'm excited about this player, and I don't really have anything else to say. I think he's in the top 6. He's either playing with Jack Hughes or Nico Hischier, and that is a really nice place to be.
Yep. Other player there, Jesper Bratt. We've talked a lot about Bratt already on various podcasts so far, but I have him for 32 goals, 53 assists, 85 points. You have him for 28 goals, 56 assists, 84 points. Obviously, we're both pretty high on this player. Shows out in all the metrics, has shown linear improvement. He looks a little bit like William Nylander. I've talked about it with Nylander, where he's just improved every single year. Bratt looks pretty similar to that. And yeah, I do think that if Hughes is healthy for a full year, Keefe does bring some stability and some improvement of his own to this lineup. I do think there's even upside beyond this 85 point number that I have him projected for Jesper Bratt. I think we could see 90+ point Jesper Bratt, and that wouldn't shock me. How do you feel about that, Blake?
Yep, I'm right with you. This is a guy I'm super high on for all the reasons you just mentioned. Like, yeah, he's had, like you said, a linear, like it's going up, right? He's trending in the right direction, and he's on a team that was pretty bad last year, right? Like they underachieved massively in terms of their offense, and that was due to a lot of injuries, right? They were just limping through the finish line, where if they come in with the full season, healthy players, especially Jack Hughes, and throw Dougie Hamilton into the mix, right? Like this guy has a 90-point ceiling, and I'm here for it. Just needs to like just stay healthy. Just everybody stay healthy. And I feel good about that. There's a little bit of a risk with Sheldon Keefe, but we've already talked about that. I think it's going to be a net positive.
Right, next up, Nico Hischier, captain of the Devils. I have for 31 goals, 50 assists, 81 points. You have him for 32 goals, 44 assists, and 76 points. So this is actually our biggest difference, and it's one where I'm higher on the player than you are. I'm a little bit curious about this to figure out where this comes from. I don't have a huge power play projection. Only 21 power play points is what I've got for him there. I think that he benefits from probably Jesper Bratt at even strength. I'm for 20 minutes, 15 seconds total time on ice. What do you have, Blake?
Total time on ice for Nico Hischier, I've got him at 19 and a half.
Okay. So there's a little bit of it right there for sure. I have him for 3.5 on the power play in 15 minutes, 15 seconds at even strength.
I've got at even strength, just under 15, and
Okay.
then just under, like 3 minutes, 25 seconds on the power play.
Okay. All right. So yeah, it's a little bit just kind of across the board there. I guess I'm a little bit
Yeah,
higher
where is it?
on his even strength deployment than he's shown really so far. I think there's a little bit of a scenario here in which I think they'll lean on the top six. Sheldon Keefe has done that, obviously, with Toronto. Had the personnel to do that, which was definitely a factor there. But I kind of think that he has the personnel to do that again with the Devils, and I think he'll be comfortable to do so. Like, you look at the top six, you go, yeah, say it's Palat, Heischer, Brett, and then Hughes with Meyer and Mercer, say. Then you go to the third line, and now you're already holding your nose. It's Thomas Tatar, it's Eric Hollett, Stefan Nason, Paul Cotter, Curtis Lazar, Nathan Bastian. Like, I think Keefe is going to do the right thing here and prioritize the top six at even strength in a pretty big way. And so that's, I think, where my bull case for Heischer's coming in.
Yeah, I'm here for it. I mean, like, again, like pace for 77 last year. I've got him for 76 this year. So I feel decent about that. I've also projected him for more power play points than you. I've got him for 23, right? Which
Okay.
would be a career high. So obviously I'm not seeing things kind of similarly in at even strength, but I did up his shorthanded time on ice a little bit. So I felt comfortable fading his even strength time on ice just a bit because he does other things, right?
Yep.
Like he's a penalty killer. So that's sort of how I got to that even strength number. Like, and I didn't fade it like crazy. It's right in line with his career numbers. But yeah, this is just what came out. I mean, I feel very comfortable with this player. He's a great player defensively, like underrated defensively, and with a player like Jesper Bratt, if he's playing with him, like, yeah, you need a player like this to kind of anchor a player like that who's rushing his brains out the way that Bratt does. So I'm big on the player. I'm projecting a bounce back, just not as high on the player as you.
All right. Andre Palat, probably going to get some top six exposure here, but it's not going to be exciting for fantasy purposes. We're both pretty in line here, 38 and 37 point projections. Don't think we need to dig in too much to that player. Realistically, he's just kind of a streamer, especially in Bangers Cats, where, he's going to throw close to 100 hits this year, I would imagine. So a little bit of value maybe as a streamer in a Bangers Cats, but other than that, you're not going to be too interested. Dawson Mercer, I have for 23 goals and 18 assists, 41 points. You have him for 23 goals, 22 assists, 45 points. Mercer is a little bit of an odd study. Had just really a terrible year last year. Like, could not get untracked whatsoever. Has shown better potential in past seasons. It's hard to say where his career goes from this point. I think this season will be a bit of a pivotal season for him. I could see it actually being quite a good season for him. I could see him eclipsing my projection by a fair bit. I could also see it going the other way where he actually gets just moved down the lineup because they can't stomach him, taking up space next to Jack Hughes. So, yeah, I want to believe in the player. We've seen flashes of it. I think it's in there somewhere, but this is the year where he's got to show it.
Yep. I think for me, the thing that gives me a bit of comfort with Dawson Mercer is, like you said, that bottom six is really, there's no one that should be coming for his minutes. So I think this is going to be an opportunity play here because obviously with the metrics, Dawson Mercer's not showing out in those, right? Shots on goal per 60, no. Individual scoring chances for, poo. All right. It's not good, but that doesn't tell the whole story with what this player brings to the table, right? I just think that he's going to get more opportunity, and it's a young player. One thing I love about Dawson Mercer is he's played all 82 games in all 3 seasons that he's had. Like, I think like that doesn't really have anything to do with fantasy, but I feel good about just the floor of the player. Like, this is a guy they feel comfortable going to, and he has some sneaky offensive upside. Like, I think I've got him for 45 points. Yeah, I could see him getting up to 55 points. Like, if he's playing, if New Jersey is better than they were last season in their efficiency, especially at even strength, and on the power play. Like, we could see a 1A, 1B power play potentially here as well, right? I mean, I do think it's going to be a true power play, but you never know. You got a new coach in a new situation. This guy could be in the mix for a spot on that power play. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for him and a potential to smash these projections.
All right, let's head over to the defenseman, Luke Hughes. I have for 9 goals, 37 assists, 46 points. You have him for 10 goals, 35 assists, and 45 points. Pretty similar in the end there, even though I have him for a little bit more power play time. The problem with Luke Hughes is he's not much of a shooter. For 142 shots, for 20 hits, for 57 blocks. Like that, the guy is not getting in the way of pucks. He's not getting in the way of people. He's not shooting pucks. Yeah, great talent. I do think that there's a really high ceiling for this player offensively, but he might be like even more of a non-factor in like the Bears Cats than even his brother Quinn Hughes is. That's concerning to me for sure in terms of his fantasy upsides. So even if he gets like true top power play all year long, he could like double his power play point projection for me, and it would still be like, okay, that was a good season. But it's again a little bit of like the Adam Fox thing that we talked about before, where he had a ton of points, but he did absolutely nothing else for you, and that's a problem.
Yeah, I like that comp a lot. It's just I like the player and I like the name for sure, but I think that's what's kind of steaming him up because, yeah, under the hood, at least at this point in his career, there's not that much going on, right? There's not that much that we can expect. He had 47 points last year, but he had 25 of those points on the power play. And even if he does get power play one, I don't think he's going to get a 71% power play share, which is what he had last season, right? To get those big numbers. So, he could get power play one, but it's kind of the situation that you described, right? He's playing 2 minutes and 45 and Dougie Hamilton's playing 2 minutes 25, right? They're going to eat into each other's value. So to me, Luke Hughes is like your second to last defenseman or your last defenseman you draft on your team. I mean, maybe that's not even selling him as much as he should be, but that's kind of how I'm valuing him. I'd rather take a shot on a player like Shane Gostisbehere, who is going to get a top power play, right? I think in Carolina or, players of the like, right? Just a bit more, like you said, meat on the bone. Luke Hughes, again, though, crazy high ceiling for his career, but right now he's not bringing much to the table besides offense. And if he doesn't have power play one, that offense is going to go down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think Luke Hughes is dependent on power play one for his offense, where Hamilton is not. And so that is concerning, but I do think that Hughes could also, in his second full NHL season, take a substantial step. Wouldn't be the first Hughes brother to do something like that. So, I want to hold space for both of those things. This is a base projection, obviously, kind of building off what we saw last year. Did give him some upticks in a few spots, but also, hard to get truly excited about a fantastic fantasy ceiling when he's not providing much in the peripheral categories. Dougie Hamilton, on the other hand, he can do it whether he's on the top power play or not. 15 goals, 45 assists, 60 points is my projection. 18 goals, 46 assists, rounding down to 63 points for yourself. I think really the difference between us is you have him just for a little bit more of that power play time than I do. But overall, I think we see the player pretty similarly. He is going to get a ton of shots. I have him for 266 shots. Okay blocks, 98 blocks, not much of a hitter, 67 hits, but still more than Hughes does in those categories. I think that this is a player who, when healthy, is going to shoot a ton. He's going to score goals from the defense position. If he gets power play one all season long, like you could be looking at a 75 point plus ceiling for a guy like Dougie Hamilton.
Yeah, I love it. There's just so much more here that you can bank on. And to me, Dougie Hamilton's, he's a bit of a unicorn. His name's not Hamilton's, it's Hamilton. Yeah, he's a bit of a unicorn to me, like a guy that has 20 goal potential from the back end, the insane shots. Like he had 275 shots in 2022-23. That's like more than most forwards. This guy's incredible. And I just would rather, stake my claim on a player like that as opposed to Luke Hughes. Even like you said, even if Dougie Hamilton is getting power play two, I still think we're looking at probably 15 goals, and 55 points or something like that. But I do I projected him for 70 last year. That didn't hit obviously with his injury. And then, Lindy Ruff putting him on power play two, even before he got injured. I don't know. I am really hoping he gets up to power play one, but it wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't. But either way, I'm loving the player. 55 to 60 points feels like a really nice projection here.
Yep. All right. Top three targets. Number one for me, Timo Meier. I do think this guy is going to be a value in most drafts this year. Dougie Hamilton. As mentioned, I think he can return value where he's going in drafts. I think he can return value even if he's not on the top power play, and then if he gets it, it's just bonus on top. And then Jesper Bratt, love the player. I think he's got a ceiling 90 plus points, and you're not paying for it where he's going right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, we talked about these guys a lot, so we don't have to delve in too much here. I've got Jesper Bratt as my number one, Timo Meier at number two. You could maybe switch those. Like I like your take on Timo Meier. I just think he's going to be major value this year. And then Big Dougie, teach me how to Dougie, buddy. Do it this season. Teach everybody how to Dougie. I still don't know how to Dougie. Like I said, I did learn how to do the gritty by watching a YouTube video. I might have to do that with the Dougie as well. I don't know. Should we live stream that as well, Nate, or what?
I think if you want to live stream any of your dance moves for the general public, I will make the Apples and Ginos channel available to you at a moment's notice.
Oh my God. That, you know what? That's a verbal contract. That's here for everybody to see. That is a legally binding. So thank you very much, Nate, for your service.
All right. Well, we've reached the end of another beefer, but tell us in the comments which team you're most excited for of this group. Which team are you the most excited for? Would it be the Devils for you, Blake?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were so excited last year. This is the year, right? But I mean, there's just that little bit of a negative with Sheldon Keefe in there. I think it's going to be positive, but it's a new coach. So, we have to temper expectations a tiny bit, but this team's a wagon offensively. I'm stoked.
Definitely. Do want to remind everyone, Apples and Ginos Patreon, $2 tier, $8 tier, $15 tier, all coming to you. Various different perks, live shows. We got patron-only Discord channels. We got access to play in a league against myself. Every year, I get some people in my comments saying, man, I'd love to play in your league with that take that you just had. So you want to put your money where your mouth is, come join me in the Patron League, and we can show down. My show notes are obviously going to be available as well. The player evaluation tools, that's a new one for this year. I'm really excited about being able to bring that to the Patreon members this year. And yeah, for those $15 a month sickos, you can get all questions answered guaranteed, if that's something you so desire. While you're here, check out the Discord, join Best Ball Slow Drafts. By the time this episode comes out, we'll probably be at like 59 or something crazy like that. I don't know. Rate, review, subscribe, comment, do all that good stuff. Best way to lend us some support if we brought you any value today. Hopefully, this episode did bring you some value. That is going to be all that we've got for it. Helped you get a little bit better at fantasy hockey today. We hope all the advanced stats you heard today came from Natural Stat Trick, which is a terrific free resource. Many thanks to the band They're There for supplying music for the podcast. Be sure to check out their Spotify as well. That's it, folks. Much love.